Welcome to Module 2, Crisis Management of the Certified Protection Professional Program by ASIS and the Protection of Assets Framework. In this chapter, we will discuss emergency response planning, which is a critical component of crisis management. Organizations today face many types of emergencies, natural disasters, accidents, fires, cyber incidents, or security threats. When such events occur, the speed and effectiveness of the response determine how much damage can be prevented. Emergency response planning helps organizations prepare structured procedures in advance so that when an incident occurs, people know exactly what actions to take, who is responsible, and how to protect lives and assets. In this chapter, we will understand how organizations design emergency response plans and why these plans are essential for operational resilience. Emergency response planning is a key part of preparing an organization for unexpected incidents. A single plan cannot always predict every possible emergency. However, the process of building an emergency response team and developing a structured plan provides a clear framework for action. This framework helps organizations respond quickly, systematically, and effectively during a crisis. Planning also ensures that roles, responsibilities, communication channels, and procedures are defined before an emergency occurs. Without proper planning, response actions can become confused, delayed, or uncoordinated, which can increase the impact of the emergency. Therefore, emergency response planning is about preparedness, coordination, and organized action during critical situations. One important concept in emergency planning is the All-Hazards Emergency Operations Plan, often called an EOP. An emergency operations plan provides a basic framework that can be applied to multiple types of emergencies. Instead of creating completely separate plans for every possible situation, organizations develop a core emergency response structure that can handle many different incidents. This structure may include evacuation procedures, communication protocols, emergency teams, and safety checklists. The advantage of the all-hazards approach is that many emergencies require similar response actions, regardless of the specific cause. For example, evacuation procedures used during a fire may also apply during an earthquake, chemical incident, or other emergency. Because of this flexibility, organizations can respond faster and more effectively when unexpected situations arise. While many organizations use an all-hazards emergency plan, some situations require threat-specific emergency plans. Certain industries face unique risks that require specialized procedures. For example, a healthcare facility may require a highly specific plan for infectious disease outbreaks, which would be very different from the procedures used during an earthquake. There are three important considerations when developing threat-specific plans. First is assess your organization. Each organization must determine the best approach for planning based on its specific operations, risks, and environment. Second is keep it simple. Regardless of the format used, the plan should be easy to understand and clearly outline responsibilities for those assigned to respond during emergencies. Third is ensure effectiveness. The emergency plan must clearly define roles, responsibilities, and procedures so that response teams can act quickly and efficiently during extraordinary situations. A well-designed threat-specific plan ensures that specialized risks are addressed without creating confusion during an emergency. When developing emergency response plans, organizations must consider several important operational factors. The first consideration is shelter. Shelter planning ensures that individuals have a safe location during emergencies, along with access to essential support such as water, sanitation, food, and communication systems. The second consideration is data security. During emergencies, organizations must ensure secure control and visitor access to sensitive areas. Accurate records and access control help maintain accountability and operational control during crisis situations. The third factor is assembly areas. Assembly areas are designated locations where personnel can safely gather after evacuation. These areas should ideally be located outside the immediate danger zone. Another key factor is shutdown procedures. In certain situations, shutting down equipment or processes before evacuation may be necessary. However, this must be balanced carefully because shutdown procedures can delay evacuation and increase risk if not managed properly. Additional planning considerations focus on evacuation and post-incident operations. The first factor is special needs planning. Emergency plans must consider individuals who may require additional assistance, such as persons with disabilities or those needing specialized support. The next factor is alerting and notification. Organizations must establish clear systems to alert personnel quickly during emergencies, ensuring that everyone receives timely warnings. Another important consideration is accounting for personnel. After evacuation, organizations must ensure that all employees, visitors, and contractors are accounted for. Next is emergency response points. These are designated locations where key personnel and responders can meet to coordinate emergency actions and decisions. Finally, organizations must consider reoccupation planning. Once the emergency has been controlled, management must decide when it is safe to re-enter the facility. Before reoccupation, safety inspections must be conducted, and in some cases, alternate transportation or remote work arrangements may be required. Proper planning ensures that organizations not only respond effectively to emergencies, but also recover safely after the incident. When an emergency occurs, time and resources are limited, so organizations must establish clear priorities for response actions. The first priority is protect human life. The safety of employees, visitors, and responders must always come first. Evacuation, personal protection, and rescue efforts take the highest priority. The second priority is prevent or reduce injury. Emergency procedures should be designed and practiced so that they minimize exposure to hazards and prevent additional harm. The third priority is reduce asset exposure. Where possible, organizations should protect critical equipment and facilities from damage, especially high-hazard locations or sensitive assets. The fourth priority is optimize loss control. This means implementing measures that reduce the overall financial and operational impact of the incident. Finally, the fifth priority is restore normal operations. After the immediate emergency is controlled, the organization should focus on returning to normal business operations as quickly and safely as possible. These priorities help decision-makers act quickly and consistently during crisis situations. Emergency planning must address to keep protective actions, evacuation, and shelter in place. Evacuation involves moving people away from a dangerous location to a safe area. When planning evacuation procedures, organizations must answer several key questions. For example, where are the primary and alternate exits? How will occupants be notified of an emergency? How will individuals with disabilities or special needs be assisted? And where will people assemble after leaving the building? In some situations, evacuation may not be the safest option. Instead, organizations may use shelter-in-place procedures, where occupants remain inside the building but move to designated protected areas. Shelter-in-place planning must consider hazards such as tornadoes, hazardous material incidents, or severe weather, and ensure that safe spaces are clearly identified. Both evacuation and shelter-in-place strategies are essential components of comprehensive emergency response planning. Effective communication is one of the most important elements of emergency management. During an emergency, clear communication ensures that people receive instructions quickly and understand what actions to take. The first component is notification systems. These systems provide warnings through methods such as public address systems, alarms, bells, or sirens. Emergency notifications must be accessible to all personnel, including individuals with hearing impairments. The second component is emergency contacts. Organizations must maintain updated lists of key contacts, response teams, and external emergency services. Another important issue is overloaded networks. During emergencies, communication networks can become congested due to heavy call volumes. To address this, organizations should maintain backup communication methods, keep device batteries charged, and ensure that multiple communication channels are available. Strong communication planning helps ensure fast coordination and effective decision-making during crisis. Emergency response plans must also address shutdown and restoration procedures. First is shutdown planning. Organizations should assign shutdown responsibilities to trained personnel who are familiar with the processes involved. In some situations, it may be safer to leave equipment running and evacuate immediately, especially if shutdown procedures could delay evacuation. However, when shutdown is necessary, organizations should keep procedures simple and ensure they can be performed quickly and safely. The second component is restoration planning. After an emergency, organizations must restore key operations and critical infrastructure. This involves identifying priority systems, estimating recovery times, and allocating resources needed for recovery. After the incident, facility engineering teams should also inspect buildings and grounds to identify any structural weaknesses or safety hazards before allowing reoccupation. Proper shutdown and restoration planning helps ensure a safe transition from response to recovery. Emergency response requires trained personnel with clearly defined responsibilities. One key group is the Emergency Operations Center or Crisis Management Center staff. These individuals coordinate the overall emergency response and support decision-making. Another important concept is command succession. Emergency plans must identify alternate leaders in case the primary decision-makers are unavailable during the incident. Organizations must also coordinate with external response agencies, such as fire departments, medical services, and law enforcement. Finally, medical services must be included in emergency planning. This may involve first aid teams, medical support personnel, or coordination with nearby hospitals. Having clearly identified emergency personnel ensures that response actions are organized and effective during crisis. Many organizations establish an Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, sometimes referred to as a Crisis Management Center. This facility serves as the central location where emergency response activities are coordinated. There are several important considerations when establishing an EOC. First is size and location. Small organizations may use a conference room as their EOC, while larger organizations may require dedicated facilities. In large or geographically dispersed organizations, multiple EOCs may be necessary. Second is alternate locations. Organizations should designate backup EOC locations in case the primary site becomes damaged or inaccessible during an emergency. Third is required capabilities. An effective EOC must support communication systems, coordination of emergency teams, and access to critical information needed for decision-making. A well-designed EOC allows leaders to manage emergencies efficiently and maintain control during complex situations. An important part of emergency planning is ensuring continuity of command during a crisis. Emergencies can occur at any time. If key leaders are unavailable, the organization must still be able to maintain effective decision-making and control. This is why organizations establish command succession procedures. Typically, the security manager, crisis manager, or another designated leader may serve as the alternate authority if the primary command leader is absent. Another important tool is succession lists. These lists identify who will assume leadership roles if primary personnel are unavailable. Succession lists should be documented, regularly reviewed, and included in emergency planning documents. Maintaining clear succession plans ensures that emergency actions continue without confusion or delays. Organizations rarely manage emergencies alone. They must coordinate closely with external emergency response agencies. When developing emergency plans, planners should consider several key questions about these agencies. First is location and capability. Where is the nearest emergency agency located, and what types of services can they provide during an emergency? Second is response speed and needs. How quickly can responders arrive? And what information or support will they require from the organization when responding? Third is contact and agreements. Organizations should ensure that formal contact procedures or agreements exist with local emergency services. Finally, planners should consider site familiarity. Emergency responders should be familiar with the facility layout and potential hazards. In many cases, organizations invite responders to visit the site and participate in drills to improve coordination during real emergencies. Emergency planning must also address medical response capabilities. The first step is to assess in-house medical capability. Organizations should determine whether trained medical personnel, first aid responders, or medical equipment are available on-site and what types of medical conditions they can manage. The second aspect is planning requirements for medical response. Organizations should ensure that personnel are trained in first aid and CPR, and that automated external defibrillators or AEDs are available where appropriate. It is also important to coordinate with nearby hospitals or medical providers for emergency transport and treatment. Additional planning may include backup transportation arrangements, trauma response procedures, and psychological support for employees after serious incidents. Proper medical planning helps organizations protect lives and support recovery after emergencies. Security and fire protection play a major role in emergency preparedness and response. Organizations must recognize that local law enforcement or fire services may not always be immediately available, especially if infrastructure damage or resource shortages occur during a major incident. Therefore, organizations must develop internal security and fire protection capabilities. One consideration is the difference between industrial and non-industrial facilities. Industrial facilities may have internal fire brigades or specialized emergency teams, while non-industrial locations typically rely more on external emergency responders. Another important element is first responder partnerships. Organizations should maintain strong relationships with local fire departments, law enforcement, and emergency medical services. Finally, access control and security procedures must be maintained during emergencies. Security teams may need to restrict access to damaged areas, protect critical assets, and manage site entry during crisis response operations. Even the best emergency plans will fail if personnel do not understand their roles and responsibilities. This is why training and exercises are essential parts of emergency preparedness. First, organizations must ensure that crisis teams and response personnel receive specialized training related to their responsibilities. Next is general personnel awareness. All employees should understand basic emergency procedures, such as evacuation routes, alarm signals, and assembly locations. Training may include classroom sessions, online learning modules, or practical drills. Organizations should also consider visitors and temporary personnel. These individuals must receive basic awareness information, such as emergency exits and safety procedures. Regular training ensures that everyone knows how to respond quickly and correctly during emergencies. Organizations use different types of drills and exercises to test their emergency plans. One common method is tabletop exercises. These involve discussion-based scenarios where leaders and response teams walk through emergency situations and evaluate decision-making processes. Another method is evacuation and shelter-in-place drills. These drills allow employees to practice evacuation routes or protective shelter procedures, ensuring they know exactly what to do during a real emergency. Organizations may also use online training and scenario-based exercises to provide broader participation and reinforce emergency response concepts. Finally, full-scale exercises simulate real emergencies and may involve coordination with external emergency response agencies. These exercises test communication, coordination, and operational readiness under realistic conditions. Regular drills help organizations identify weaknesses in plans and improve overall emergency preparedness. When organizations conduct emergency drills and exercises, it is important to follow proper exercise design principles to ensure the training is effective. The first principle is train to the plan, then exercise the plan. Exercises should closely reflect the actual security and emergency plans of the organization. The goal is to test how well the plan performs under realistic conditions. The second principle is notify external agencies. If an exercise could potentially trigger an emergency response, local emergency agencies must be notified in advance. This prevents confusion and avoids unnecessary deployment of real emergency services. The third principle is keep exercises realistic within safety limits. Exercises should simulate realistic conditions, but safety must always remain the priority. The use of force or simulated threats should be carefully controlled and supervised. Finally, organizations should exercise alternate decision makers and routes. Drills should include alternate exits, backup routes, and alternate decision makers, not just the primary response team. This ensures that the organization remains prepared even if key personnel or primary evacuation routes are unavailable during a real emergency. Let us conclude Chapter 4, Emergency Response Planning, with a few key takeaways. First, organizations should plan for all hazards. An all-hazards emergency framework allows organizations to respond effectively to a wide range of emergencies. Second, the protection of human life must always be the top priority. Evacuation procedures, personal protection, and rescue operations should guide all emergency response decisions. Third, effective communication is critical during emergencies. Reliable notification systems and clearly identified emergency contacts help ensure quick coordination and response. Finally, organizations must train continuously. Regular drills, tabletop exercises, and full-scale exercises help validate emergency plans and improve preparedness over time. Emergency preparedness is not a one-time activity. It is an ongoing process of planning, training, and improving. If you found this video helpful for understanding emergency response planning and CPP concepts, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more lessons on security management, risk management, and crisis management. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next chapter of the CPP learning series.